There it is. All right, Mr. John Luck, how are you today, sir? Thanks for being on Attribution Time. For those who don't know, John's in the UK, so I'm not sure how many of those who are tracking with me now are connecting with their UK colleagues, but definitely follow John Luck. I was just, perusing through LinkedIn, found his content. It was great, easy to digest, and it's a lot within the marketing space. John's been head and senior marketer at a lot of different organizations, running the marketing group within different organizations. He's currently doing a lot of freelance work underneath Lucky Promotions. It's a good thing your last name is Luck. It goes so well with a lot of things. But we connected. You had a great post about how to track and monitor marketing efforts, which you've had to really drive that initiative at a lot of different in a lot of different roles that you've had. And so I wanted to connect and let others get to know about you. But thanks for being on Attribution Time.
Yeah, thanks so much for the intro, Ian. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. We were just saying off the call that I like talking about this stuff and speaking about it. It makes things clearer in my mind exactly how they all fit together. As it's with attribution, it's not simple. There's no kind of out of the box method that's going to be 100% correct every time. So yeah, it's something that needs discussion and looking into.
Exactly. So, I mean, you've been doing all those different sorts of marketing. Obviously, you're at a freelance. You're doing a lot of freelance now, but give a little bit of a background about your experience and the challenges that you had within trying to measure your marketing results and report on those things.
Yeah, cool. So I started off, I was an email marketer. I worked at an organization that had an email marketing tool. They also had a web analytics tool, but I was more focused on the email side of things. And, we were doing a lot of marketing to tech companies, and I was writing and curating a lot of articles that were trying to appeal to this tech audience. So I was really focused on what's going to get eyeballs, what's going to improve clicks.
Yeah.
And in terms of the email marketing product, we were trying to get everyone to stay on our landing pages, trying to get them more involved in using the tool. So it was a lot of email and landing page use. Then as I kind of developed my knowledge a little bit more, and in fact, the company moved this way at the same time, I realized that actually getting people onto your landing pages has no real value, whereas getting people onto your website, there is value in having more traffic on your website, and that's where people are going to take further actions. So I kind of got more involved with the web analytics tool at that company. Then I moved to another organization, a large life sciences organization in the UK, and I get really involved in kind of the analytics. There was a couple of professionals there that were really great in helping me out, seeing what they were doing. And I kind of, at that time, I was like, oh, look at this. We were doing emails with UTM parameters, and then we were tracking it onto a web shop and seeing how much money people spent with us. And I was looking, the email revenue that's being driven pales into insignificance when you compare it to, the organic traffic and also the paid search. And that made me kind of, just think like, oh, that's where it's at. I need to go and learn these skills, learn about websites tracking on your site, Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, Google Search Console. And then as I understood
let me pause you right there real quick, John, because there's a really good point in that. There's two that I want to call out that you've mentioned that I don't want to just easily brush over. The first piece is there's a difference between marketing analytics and marketing attribution. And I think I'm seeing a lot of tools nowadays that market themselves as marketing attribution. Oh, I gotta sneeze. Oh no. Okay. They market themselves as marketing attribution, but they're truly just marketing analytics. Like they might have like really soft attribution, like first touch, last touch, but really at the end of the day, it's just web page hits, it's web engagement, it's this and that. And it's not to say that's not valuable. It is valuable for a marketer. To your point, like you can understand, hey, organic traffic is valuable, right? But it's interesting where like I think people are throwing attribution out there when it's really just general marketing metrics that they're measuring, which I think is really interesting.
Sure. So I think it's kind of, the metrics are what people are doing on your site. So that's kind of Google Tag Manager, making sure that there's actually useful things being tracked on your site. And then I kind of look at attribution as being within that. You've got all of the things that are happening on your site as a whole, and then you're trying to see where they came from with each of those touch points.
Yeah,
So I think they're kind of attribution and analytics. It's really hard to have one without the other. They both.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
and that brings up the second point of like using UTMs, because that's UTMs heavily sit within, I guess, initially analytics, right? Because before, I mean, attribution's always been around, but it's always been like base models, right? First touch, last touch. You could do linear modeling, right? If, in a Google sheet, you could try to, like, easily break that down and say, okay, here's even distribution across these things. So it's always kind of been there, but UTMs were great for marketing analytics because it was, oh, we can track web engagement, we can hit these web page views, we know where all our traffic's coming from, like, and that eventually, I think very quickly adapted to being a part of the attribution process as well, because not everything has a campaign associated to it, right? It's coming in through a certain channel or source that you may not be able to track. And and it was just kind of it's really the base. And it's interesting enough, like, we don't talk enough about UTMs, but UTMs are really the base of web traffic, which is at the end of the day tracking for attribution as well.
yes, absolutely. And like when I was at this organization, I was, we were trying to get everything as much as possible, like UTMs on it, or every social post, because back then we were in the mindset of like every social post leads back to your website. That's the way, it's all of the tools that you were using, rather than having things like for people to consume in social and stay on the social platforms. We were trying to get them all back to the website. Like every digital marketing touch point was just pushing people back to the site. And I think that kind of way of thinking, it's sort of, well, because of all the social media providers have made that less attractive to do. I mean, before, Twitter was just links everywhere, and then they realized, oh no, if people keep clicking these links, they're not using Twitter. Let's
Yeah,
keep them on our
exactly.
site, deprioritize the links. So yeah,
I
that
think I
was
think
kind of.
LinkedIn's doing that now too. I mean, I'm not into it as I'm not as acknowledging it as much, but I'm like, man, every time I post a link, it gets less engagement, and
If
the
every social platform does it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So
it's just there.
LinkedIn,
Yeah,
if you want to get reach, don't post links. So
yeah,
that's,
yeah,
yeah. Um, yeah, so that was a really cool time doing that. And I like that model where you're tracking everything back to the website. But then as it became, more interactions are happening elsewhere, sort of rise of dark social, I suppose it's called, where you're not tracking everything. Um, it led me to follow, you need more of a, well, I suppose if you've got a main contact form, how did you hear about us? It became really useful for the things that you can't track, so that people
yeah,
can actually tell you where they've heard from you. And for your other programs that you're, in order to kind of, one problem I had at the next company I worked for, none of the financial data was recorded in the CRM system. So they had Salesforce as a CRM, and we were running all of our campaigns through Salesforce. But then they had this back end system that had all of the kind of all of the financial results in it. So it became very hard to kind of track all of those things together, and also get the connection between what's happening on the web to what's happening in your CRM. Yeah, so I suppose one of the things that we sort of did was using the campaigns feature more in Salesforce, and then pulling in an extra field using exporting the Salesforce campaigns and exporting the data from our the legacy back end software tool to like a data warehouse. We used BigQuery at the time, and then you're kind of reporting on things rather than just letting everything be like campaigns like UTMs. You've got campaigns as in the events that you've put on, like who's attended the event, who's spoken to you at the event. You have emails, you have sent, clicked, opened. And then you're measuring that in your CRM under the campaigns, but then exporting it to the data warehousing tool, and then trying to attribute the purchases via that method as well, which is like, for me, that was kind of, you needed all three of those methods. So you have your software.
Let me ask you, in that circumstance, how long was your deal cycle?
So
on average, right? Like
between different organizations, but like it was sort of 9 to 12 months. But
so you had a lot of data that you were processing then. Like that's 9 to 12 months worth of data that you were trying to associate back to an opportunity through BigQuery it was BigQuery, right? And so like that was a let. Did you have a dedicated person? Like you were on that team, but like was that like a dedicated thing that whoever was working on worked, whether that was you or someone else? Is that it? Like, because that would take some time.
In terms of BigQuery, I am not a BigQuery expert. There was 3 or 4 people in that team who were super good at doing that, and I just said, look, here's what we've got.
This is what we need. Yeah.
Because the thing with BigQuery is you can plug everything into it, and at that organization, we were very good at plugging all of the different things in. But they needed someone to say, right, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want a report that shows me this. Yeah. And that's like, because if you ask them to put a report together saying, can you show me attribution, they would put together something that was incomprehensible. So I think that's where I kind of sit in between marketing and the tech team, and sometimes to translate what people actually want in order to get a coherent report.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, and so when you took all that crazy amount of data, because you said, hey, I was the kind of the medium between the tech team and the marketing team. You're still at the end of the day having to report that up now to the executive. So what were you doing with that data when you said, okay, we did XYZ type of attribution for around 9 to 12 month sales cycle? What was the outcome? Because typically your outcomes, right, are how many opportunities did you close? How many MQLs did you create? So what were you gaining insights solely from marketing through that? Or were you taking insights from that and also bringing that to the executive table?
So the kind of the point where I take this to the executive team and say, hey, here's what I did. The contract that I was working on actually ended before I was able to do that. But and as well, the manager left, so he was the person who really wanted it, and the person who I reported into really valued the work that I did then, because we were mainly looking at sales. We were talking, and the most effective way that was used was looking at our events. So if we put on an event, did a customer who attended the event, or not necessarily that person, but someone attended from the company, then did they go on and spend money with us afterwards? So it was most effective for. I think if we'd run it longer, it would have been interesting for some of the other marketing activities that we were doing. Like we had a lot of form completions in there that weren't showing us data, and a lot of emails that really weren't effective. But I think because the events happened further down the pipeline, that was starting to show. It was starting to show more fruits than the other activities. But maybe,
so let me ask, because what you brought up there, John, was the ROI piece, right? You're saying how much money we spent X number of dollars in an event, and we're able to track back to the individual who attended the event and see, did they spend any additional money?
So it was the money was to the account. So the individual, you can't. That was. I mean, it's very hard to. The thing that some people said that when we did it, oh, but how do you know that he had anything to do with the deal?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we don't. But this is the kind of limitation of using that kind of model.
Yeah, that's where they say contact roles kind of solve that in Salesforce, but no one does them correctly, right? So it's like, we get this pushback of, hey, how do we know this is the person versus how do we, well, if we did everything perfect in a perfect world, I still think there would be an ambiguity there, right?
But I think as a marketer, especially if you're working in attribution, you need to accept that there's some things that you're never going to fully understand. The way that different companies, the structures work, how decisions are influenced, is something that a vendor is never going to fully understand. So
Yeah.
it's an estimation game, but we kind of felt that if someone had attended our events, that has relevance. I mean, sometimes it did, sometimes it may not have done at all, but this was kind of,
Yeah, I think that's where so that's the challenge of attribution within, building it yourself, right? I mean, that takes a lot of time. It's a lot of effort. There's a team of people working through that data, trying to process that. So kudos to you all cranking through that, right? I think that's why there's been such a rise in attribution tools, right? It's because it does that for you, but it's processing all that. It's able to, spit out, here's the different attribution models, and it can kind of do it all in real time. And it's all, built within a data warehouse, and it has querying involved, and similar to what y'all were doing. It's just y'all were a little bit ahead of what's built now. But with that, I think that the where we're getting with technology, I think we can potentially get to the point where you can remove certain job titles from, the attribution modeling or something, so let's say you have 100 touch points, rather than saying, this is purely Ian being speculative, but like, rather than saying we're only going to use contact roles, which limits it to 2 people or 1 person, why don't we just remove anyone that has an associate title or something like that, and then slice the data based upon that, right? I think that would be an interesting modeling to build out there, where you can just kind of, what are the titles we don't want? Or if there's no title at all in the database in our CRM for this person, then let's not include them as a touch point, because that means we have no, something like that, where
but then again, that's kind of you thinking that
yeah,
the influencing of that organization, when you might not.
yeah,
I think the kind of way that we were working there is like, you really need to look at company profiles. If they want to engage with the sales team, if they've got the right company profile, then it's worth us at least pursuing to the point of, a salesperson speaking to them to kind of qualify whether they are actually the right person. That was kind of the best method, but
that's a good point, John, because at the end of the day, multi-touch attribution is about account engagement, right? I mean, from the B2B perspective, it is solely about how much is this account engaging with you? What are the channels that are driving those engagements, right? It's the entirety of it, and that's really a foundational piece within multi-touch attribution. So it's a great call out. Like, if we take out these things, we don't know. And it's a good example of that is, I'm working with a client right now, and the person that really drives all the decisions is someone who has the trust of their manager. The manager, this person who signed off on the contract did it because they believe in the person that's, in the day-to-day working on it, right? And so now that person has to find the value to continue to drive and renew on that contract. But it's really interesting in that, because it's like, from a CRM and like person perspective, we would just say, well, this job title, that means this person is the driver, or this person signed the contract. And it's like, no, this person actually is solely doing all of this because they trust this person down here that we are not really considering within the buying process, right? It's really interesting.
Yeah, it's so true. Like, I was at an organization, and they really targeted procurement. And like, I mean, procurement, it would make sense. It wasn't a tool that helps people with procurement. It was like a facilities and buildings kind of offer. But it's like procurement is not the decision maker there. Like procurement will come in and negotiate, but like they negotiate because someone else in the business wants it. And I was told like, no, we need this LinkedIn campaign. We need to go to procurement. And I said to them like, you know, is this really the right target? And I kind of got shouted down by a manager who said, look, do you know how much work this is taking to get it signed off? And I was like, okay, cool, I'll do it. But yeah, it's I don't think it's being discussed enough, like exactly who's the right job titles and do they actually, does the organization know well enough?
Well, and job titles nowadays are worth less than they were 10 years ago or 20 years ago, right? I mean, it's just really, we're in an interesting world where it's, you know, people get job titles because for other reasons, and you know, it's just really an interesting time. So yeah, I think that to your point, that we need to start having those conversations more around that proper targeting. I think that's why web traffic and web engagement, and like to what you were saying, what you were doing kind of earlier on, is so important. And taking that analysis, like that marketing analysis, and saying, okay, what's this engagement look like overall? And then translating that into the attribution piece once the deal closes, right? And that's, I think that's a great ending point of like, there's value in attribution, there's value in marketing analytics. They can work together, but they're really not the same. But they kind of stem from marketing. They do stem from marketing and operations, and there's a lot of value that sits in that.
Yeah, I think one of the key things as well with marketing analytics, it's asking the question, what do we want to happen? Are we tracking the things that we want, you know, and are we then, because I've been asked to put a lot of tags on pages, and I just wonder at the end of it, I'm like, what is the purpose of this page? You know, what are we trying to achieve? And if companies don't know that, how is the end user going to know exactly what they want? And then how are you going to attribute, you know, relevance to each of the channels? You know, how do you say what's the highest performing channel on this site? It's like, well, I don't know, because there's a load of meaningless touch points being tracked through each different medium. So I think that's also important.
Yeah, exactly. It comes back to revenue and ROI. And like, you could start with one piece, but you need to be able to bring it back to that end piece, right? What is it all about? Well, John, thanks for joining Attribution Time. This is a wonderful conversation. I know that a lot of people get a lot out of it, and I appreciate you joining all the way from the UK.
Yeah, thanks so much for your time. Take care.